Good afternoon. Hello, everybody. Good afternoon and welcome. Good afternoon or good evening or good morning, depending on where you are. And welcome to our masterclass on researching and developing your EVP. I'm David Thompson. I am co-founder of Employer Branding Made Easy, a co-founder along with my partner, Sarah Hockenhull, who is also on the call with us today. She'll be taking questions for us later on. Delighted you could join us today. We've got a fantastic session for you. We're going to get really practical today and show you how to research and develop your EVP. I think it's one of those things that people talk about a lot. You know, there's tons of articles everywhere on the internet. The bits that are working at the moment because there's been a big internet outage this morning, but lots of articles about the value of an EVP, why it's really good to have one, but not very much information on how you actually make one. It's one of those kind of closely guarded secrets that the agencies kind of like to keep to themselves, obviously, because it's got a lot of value to them. But we thought we'd break the rules a bit today and share with you the stuff that the agencies don't really want you to see. So a little bit about me. I've worked in employer branding for around 20 years, worked in agencies, some of the biggest known agencies in the UK, winning awards, developing lots of EVPs for the like of AXA, ASDA, LV. And a couple of years ago, I just felt that it was time to share some of that knowledge and get some more knowledge out there. So Sarah and I set up Employer Branding Made Easy. And our job is now to help organisations become more self-sufficient in employer branding. So without further ado, let us do our screen share so we can get our presentation up. Okay. And there we go. Okay. So, as we said, today we're looking at researching and developing your EVP. Sarah and I have created a series of online courses in employer branding. Can be found at our website, employerbrandingmadeeasy.com. And they're designed to take you absolutely from start to finish, from everything from scoping and planning all the way through the employer brand life cycle to strategic planning and future proofing. Our courses are really easy to follow, all video based. The time it takes to complete the courses is less than 20 hours, so not too much of your time invested, very easy to use, and we've provided lots and lots of resources to support you. And we're going to be sharing some of those resources with you today. So yeah, great courses, fantastic if you're looking to kind of develop your career, turn yourself into an employer brand practitioner who's fully skilled to be able to implement and run your own employer branding project. If you're looking to deliver results, if the business is looking for a process to follow to create an employer brand that's going to really deliver. And if your business needs turning around, if you've got lots of vacancies to fill at the moment that you're struggling with, this is a great opportunity to turn things around, come away from that agency dependency and start to be more self-sufficient. So those are our courses. There's 2 courses, as we said, online. And what we're going to do today is take you through one of the 7 modules from our second course, which is Elevate. It's the practitioner course where we get really hands-on and practical. And the second module is all about developing and researching your EVP. What we will be doing is sharing with you some downloads, some specialist guides. Sarah, I don't know if you can do that now for us, please. That would be fantastic. We have a number of specialist resources that you can download, exclusively available to you today. I'll be talking about some of these tools as we go through the presentation. So do remember to download the file. And just a reminder too, all of the files in the folder are password secured. But the password is on the name of the file. It's EBME123. And as I said, once you download them, put in the password, you can use them to help build your own EVP and your employer brand. So I'm going to take it today that you know what an EVP is. You know it's the articulation of everything that makes your organization great. I think it'd be slightly strange if you were on a webinar about building your EVP if you didn't know what one was. So I'm going to assume that you know what it is, but I think maybe it's just good to stop and think about what does it need to be and what makes a really good EVP. And for me, an EVP needs to be 3 things. It needs to be differentiated. It needs to be different from everybody else. There's no point in just saying the same things as the competition. It needs to be authentic. It needs to be a realistic evocation of what it's like to work for an organization, driven by truth and honesty. And it needs to be attractive. We need to be saying things that are pertinent to our target audiences, that are going to create an emotional reaction in them. We need to make sure we know what they want and that we speak to them in their language. And to make sure our EVP balances all of these three things and we hit the kind of sweet spot in the middle of this particular Venn diagram, we carry out three kinds of research. So to make sure we're differentiated, we carry out competitor research. To make sure we're authentic, we carry out internal research. And to make sure we're attractive, we carry out audience research, external audience research. And I'm going to talk you through each of those and how we go about doing that research in a moment. But sometimes I've spoken to clients and they kind of think, we can bypass that. I can tell you everything you need to know about why it's great to be here, what our target audiences want. And if I had a penny for every time the CEO has said to me, we can make this up, can't we? I would be a rich man. But the reality is you can't make this stuff up. You need to ground your EVP in high quality, robust research. Otherwise, you risk all of your employer branding efforts falling down flat. If we don't research and we don't find the truths and the honest views, we risk confusing and alienating our own people. They will look at your EVP and say, well, I don't recognize my business in that. And that can be quite an off-putting and a demotivating thing. And external candidates will be joining on what could be a false promise. If they actually find when they join, the reality of what was presented to them isn't the same, they'll quickly become disengaged and you'll probably lose them. So it's not a good idea to be confusing your own people or external audiences. The other risk that you have is, it's so often I've seen on employer branding projects, organizations so eager to tell their story and they kind of run into it without kind of doing any external audience research. What they end up doing is saying what they want to say, but not stopping to think if that's what the external audience wants to hear. And if they don't want to hear what you're saying, you end up wasting a lot of energy creating irrelevant content. So what we're trying to do by doing our research properly is making sure that we are totally relevant with everything we're saying. That then maximizes your opportunities for your content to be seen and to have that emotional impact that we're looking for. If we don't, there's a real danger that we just miss our targets and objectives altogether and waste a lot of energy and a lot of time. And there's a real risk these days because now we're looking to take our messages and our stories far wider than just job boards. We know there's not enough candidates to go around to make for job boards to feed every role that we have. We need to be telling our story on a higher level to people who are not necessarily actively looking for a job at the moment. But when we go into that arena, we start competing not just with people who are searching for a job, but with all of the product marketing, brand marketing messages that are out there, all of that content where we're exposed to over 10,000 marketing messages every day. So if our EVP isn't sharp, if our employer branding activity isn't well targeted, really accurate and hits emotional chords, we are likely to get absolutely lost. So my contention is always resist the temptations to cut corners at the start. Make sure you do your research properly, because ultimately it's your insurance policy to make sure that everything you do is right and it gets you best value at the end and most impact at the end. So do your research, get it right. So let's talk about that research then. How do we do it? What does it look like? What's the process? Well, now we're going to look at how we profile our audiences, how we conduct internal and external research, how we distill all of the data that we generate and make sense of our findings, and then how we then take that and build an EVP framework, and then how we then fine tune those messages for different audiences. And then finally, great, okay, what do we do with it now? So let's start off by looking at audience segmentation. I always think this is the starting point for any EVP project should be understanding who you're trying to speak to, understand what's important to them and what matters to them. So I always advise that we start off the process by breaking down our audiences and segmenting our needs. So you can define your target audience by looking at your existing employees, look at your organograms, look at your potential new hires that you might need in the near future, but also look at the talent you're going to need further down the line. What does this business need to look like in 3, 4, 5 years' time? Start breaking down the types of roles and the types of departments and job families that you have. You might want to work with your resourcing team to do this. Things like looking at head office roles, software developers, contact center, distribution center, and then dip more deeply into those areas. Again, what job functions do we have? Finance, procurement, buying, HR, and marketing. So you've got a good, clear picture in your mind of the type of roles that you're trying to fill, the type of people you're trying to attract. But that'll only kind of tell you, okay, what skills do we need, and what kind of jobs are we trying to fill. I think it's always a great idea to then dig deeper and start building out personas. So taking each of those key job roles and then adding some flesh on the bones. So you can say, okay, well, this person, let's bring them to life. So Karen here, we're not only saying what kind of skills she has and what kind of role she'd be right for, but we're talking about her aspirations, her values, her career frustrations, the things that matter to her most. So further down the line, when we've developed our EVP, we know the emotional buttons that we're trying to hit with Karen. So we can start to match what we've got further down the line with what our audiences need. It's also a helpful thing to kind of think about what kind of media consumption habits they've got. So you can start building this into your media schedule for further down the line. So you can start thinking, oh, well, Karen, she's clearly a social, media user. She loves YouTube. She loves the BBC. So it really helps just to bring to life exactly who we're trying to speak to. And that's important when we're going out and trying to tell stories. We need to know what buttons we're trying to press. So then we come into the research phase itself. There are three types of research that we carry out when we're building the EVP, as I said at the start: our competitor research, our internal research, and our external research. We start off with competitor research, and I think this is really important and, again, sometimes overlooked. Again, people kind of launch into EVP and employer brand projects without taking stock of the market they're in, and getting the context that they need. So by running a kind of audit, you can understand your position in the market. You can see what your competitors are doing well. You can understand what competitive advantage you may have over them. What it really makes sure is that we don't replicate what others are doing. We don't just kind of spend all this time generating our EVP, then building out our employer brand and getting to market and finding it looks and feels exactly the same as everybody else. We have got a bit of a follow my leader habit in resourcing sometimes. When we're developing employer brands, we like to look like everybody else. But, really, what we should be doing is figuring out how we're going to differentiate. How are we going to tell our story, and how are we going to be different? So how do we do this? Well, I provided you today with an audit template that we use. We generally pick between 6 and 8 core competitors, and then we use our template to measure the strengths of their employer brand across 9 different dimensions. So this takes away the kind of subjectivity of, does it look nice? Does it feel nice? And actually gives us defined areas to measure and score. And it's really helpful because you can build one of these little matrices for each of your competitors and for yourself. So you can start to see how well you score in different areas. So, for example, we can see this client here is performing well in this employer brand in the areas of authenticity. It feels like real people telling real stories, and it's believable. It's well supported. People are following it and sharing it on social media. But maybe where it's falling down is its activation, where we're actually seeing the stories, and when we're seeing the advertising material, maybe isn't in the right place for the audience we're trying to speak to. So it's a good exercise to carry out and understand, where do we sit? Where's the benchmark? Where's the bar? If I'm in an industry and we're looking at the competitors and they're all award-winning, well, heck, we have to be award-winning, don't we? That's our level that we need to get to be competitive. Whereas if I'm in another sector where we're looking at and saying, you know what, they haven't really caught on to great employer branding yet, we only have to get to a certain level to be better than them and make sure we are the best for our talent, then that's fine. So it's good to understand just where you sit and what you need to do to be competitive. Then we move on to our external research. And this is an area I think is so important, as we said at the start, but it's so often, when I've worked on projects and you put in a budget submission, it's the thing that gets cut first. And for me, it shouldn't. It's so essential. External research really helps us to understand how your people feel about your company, what they think it's like to work for you, and what really matters to them. It's really important. There are a number of different routes you can follow. But for me, the route I use most is online surveys. Um, Now, online surveys and external market research used to be expensive and difficult. It used to be something you really had to outsource to a research agency. And I think in some ways, this is usually the first thing that's cut because people assume it's going to be hard and expensive to do. The reality is the world has changed, and you know what? Do it yourself research now is eminently doable. It's quite straightforward to do. Um, Providers like SurveyMonkey or Pollfish, you can quite easily set up your own surveys and buy audiences from them. Very, very straightforward process. So you can kind of say, all right, I want to speak to an audience of this age, this gender, location, income, industry sector, profession. And I want to ask them a set of questions. So if you want to know what engineers in India think it's like to work for your organization compared to engineers in the USA or in Germany, you can do it really easily, and it doesn't cost that much to do. You can build up an audience big enough to give you fairly robust data for not that much money. So I was really surprised how little this cost when I started doing it, and I now do it on every project because I think the insight it gives you is just fantastic. It gives you such a good grounding on whether there are perception gaps, whether people think something differently, or whether there are different needs of audiences in different territories. For example, we were working on a project recently for a client where we found that the needs of audiences in India and the Philippines were all based around training and development and salary. It was all about building your career potential so you could earn more. Whereas we found the audiences in Germany and the UK and the US were far more focused on purpose and colleagues and culture. So we had to adopt completely different tacks with our EVP and our employer brand in those different countries because we knew audiences wanted different things. So it's so insightful, so helpful, and probably costs a heck of a lot less than you think. So I think the basic SurveyMonkey enterprise license is about £750. And then when you're buying audiences, I think, I was doing those surveys, each one in different countries for about £700, £800 each. I just think it's fantastic value for the value of the insight that you get from it. So don't forget your external research. If you don't fancy doing that, you want another way of doing it, or indeed if you want to do your external surveys and you want to augment them with some further data, you can speak to your agencies and recruiters. So recruitment agencies are speaking to candidates every day. They'll have an understanding of what they think of your organization and what they feel and what matters to them. So they're good people to speak to. Equally, your in-house recruitment teams will have insight. They'll be good people to speak to as well. Or you can look at industry forums or use your LinkedIn networks or go into LinkedIn groups to ask questions as well. So various other little sources you can use yourself to kind of augment. And another great group to speak to is people who've recently joined the organization or people who've recently been through the recruitment process, your interviewees. These people have clearly got a nice, fresh, recent memory of what they thought it was like to work for your organization before they applied. And the added benefit of this is they can also tell you, okay, well, this is how my perception changed over time, and also give you some useful pointers about the recruitment process as well. So another good cohort to speak to. Just make sure you speak to people who've kind of been through that in the last 6 months, otherwise their memories start to fade. So various different ways that we can do our external audience research. None of it may be as expensive or as difficult as you think it would be. So having done our internal research, our external research, we move on to internal research. And this is where we start digging into our own organization and finding out what our employees really think and feel about working here. This is where we get our truths that will come out and form the basis of our EVP framework. We can look at 3 different ways of gaining insight within our business. The first is to run internal surveys. Now, you may already have an engagement survey that you've run, and that's useful. Engagement surveys can be really helpful. My only slight hesitation with kind of relying on them, I don't rely on them, it is a hesitation, is that they only give you answers to questions that you ask. So it's quite easy to miss out on little nuances. And sometimes I found when you're putting together an EVP, some of the things that feed into it are very nuanced. You wouldn't have picked them up necessarily from your engagement survey, but you might do in conversation with people. So they're great to have. They can give you a really broad base of data to pull from. Or it may be that you've got regular pulse surveys going out and that you can actually piggyback on one of those and add some questions to that too. Equally, you can also use, as we said before, SurveyMonkey to put out a survey to your business. What you can do here is then start mirroring the questions you asked of your external audiences. You can ask the same questions to your internal audiences, and then you can start doing some really smart stuff, which I'm going to share with you in a minute. So internal surveys give you that broad kind of quantitative set of data that's helpful, that then that a lot of people have contributed to this, so therefore the views and the comments that we're seeing in here are widely held and widely felt. But they lack a bit of depth, as we said, and sometimes there are nuances that you can only pick up by speaking to groups of people. So I always recommend running focus groups as well. This allows you to explore themes, and sometimes it's quite good to do your your surveys first, get your results from that, and then you can take the findings from those into your focus groups and explore the thoughts in greater detail. It's great to have groups between 6 and 10 people. I generally try not to have any more, otherwise they can get there's just too much to manage. 60 to 90-minute duration. Don't just pick your superstars. Don't just pick the people you know are going to say great things. This needs to be authentic. So we want a real cross-section, a real slice of people from right across the business representing different areas. We've provided you today with a guide on how to run internal focus groups and some of the questions to ask. So that should help you. Tips from me: record everything. Clearly, these days now, I'm finding it's easier to do them in Zoom or in Teams than it is actually to do them face to face. I always said I will never do these things over video call. I want to see the whites of people's eyes. Actually, I found in COVID, when we've had to do them, it works absolutely fine. It's a brilliant way of doing things. The other great benefit of Teams and Zoom is that you can record it. So make sure you record everything you do. Don't try and hold a focus group and write notes. You won't keep up. You'll lose things. And you want to be able to go back over things, listen again, absorb, really, really sink into it and listen to what people are saying. So record everything you're doing. And then what I do is use a transcription service. Obviously, it's laborious trying to go back through an audio file and then type out a transcription yourself. But there are brilliant transcription sites like rev.com where you upload your recorded file from Zoom or Teams, and it provides a pretty accurate transcription for not a huge amount of money. Generally a 90-minute session costs about, I think it's about £70, $70 ish. To get a full accurate transcription. And I find it when I'm coming to the analysis stage, I find reading, for some reason for me, it's easier to pick out things than it is when I'm listening. So get a written transcription done and make sure you've got all those to hand. Now, the third strand of research that I always do is executive interviews. It's speaking to the key leaders in the business. The reason for this is when we do our internal research, imagine that being like a snapshot, a screenshot, if you like. It's a moment in time of what people think and feel about working for your organization at that moment. But it might be that your business is going to go on a different direction. It might be that you need to hire different types of people. It might be that you're going to be involved in different types of services or different strategy. And that might need feeding into your EVP, and to do this, it's helpful. This is the guidance that executives can give you. It's the view from the bridge. So try and get 20 minutes with the key executives and heads of in your business. Ask them. Again, we've provided a guide on the questions to ask them, but get them involved. Ask them about the direction of travel for the business. Again, record it. Again, get your transcription made of it. What I also find is that this helps to kind of prick the interest of the senior people in the business. They're curious. They're saying, oh, okay, so you're doing this research. I can't wait to see the outputs. So it's nice to get them involved. It means they, as active stakeholders, they can support your project and really help push it forward. So executive interviews are really important to do. So we've kind of done our three strands of research. We've now got our data coming back from our external surveys, be they online or be they just conversations you've had. We've got our data from our internal sources, our focus groups, transcriptions. We've got our surveys that we've carried out, and we've got our executive interview transcriptions as well. Now it's time to kind of try and make sense of all of that and try and put that into some kind of order. So I find, as I said, reading back over transcriptions and reading through survey data, you'll start to kind of form an understanding. Things will start leaping out of you quite clearly, leaping out at you quite clearly. So you've got your external research, your internal audience research, your competitor research to consider as well, and your executive interviews. But something else you'll want to consider at this point as well is your vision, mission, values, any other frameworks that exist within the business that you think might have to kind of feed into this pot of data that we have. So don't forget those, make sure that they are fed in and thought about. And essentially what you'll find is when you go back over your transcripts and your interviews, you'll find that you're getting statements that you can drop into three main categories. What can we offer now? What makes us unique? What kind of quotes and do I have to back that up? What are my audience needs and perceptions? What do they think of us at the moment? What is it they want? And our competitive positioning. Where are we in the market? What do we need to do to make sure that we are competitive? All of these things will start, as you go through your data, will start becoming clear to you. And you can start, as I said, putting them into these three categories. Now, what you will find is that you'll fill those boxes with quite easily with things that you find. You will also find that your employer brand research kicks up 100 other things that you didn't expect to see. It just seems to always bring to life and illuminate so many unexpected things. So, for example, if you're in the, what can we offer? It might show you, have we got our offer right? Are we giving the right things to the audiences? Now we understand what they need. What characterizes us? What do people love about working here? Have we got what audiences want? Are there perception gaps? And if there are, what do we need to be closing those perception gaps? What's wrong? Why are people feeling differently? How do we present ourselves to differentiate? What have we got our competitors don't have? What do we need to do to balance our needs? So loads of other things will come out of this, and quite often they can end up in spin-off projects in my experience. So to me, EVP research is so much more valuable than just giving you the stuff that will build your EVP. Let me tell you a little story about a project I did a couple of years ago where we were working for a retailer and they had a very large distribution centre in the middle of the UK. And when I ran focus groups with the people who worked in the distribution centre and said, what do you like about working here, but also what could be better here? And the thing they all said was the boots. They said, our boots aren't good enough. We've got cold feet. And it's very hard to enjoy your job when you've got cold feet. And I kind of took this back to the exec and kind of said, well, this is my finding. And then they had no idea because it had never come up no one had ever asked the question in an engagement survey, how are your feet? So, by running those focus groups, I found out things that I could then feed back to the exec. We set in motion, new projects to kind of address these things. So it's got so much value to it, more value than we'll ever know. And that's why I think at this point, when I've done the initial research, what I usually do then is go back and present the research findings to the kind of leadership team. A, because they're kind of itching to see something at this point. B, it's just really great to get stuff in front of them and start thinking, okay, what have we found? What do we need to choose? Change. What do we need to act upon before we go into the phase of actually building and developing the EVP framework? So it's good to pause at this point and just reflect and share and get some feedback. And it also helps to kind of prepare the powers that be for what's coming afterwards as well. So we said earlier on that if you ask the same questions of your external audiences as you do your internal audiences, you can start to do some really smart things and clever things. So just want to show you this example of where we did that for a client. what we do in our external and internal research is ask both audiences. We give them 12 factors which we know are proven to be driving factors for people's engagement, and I've provided all of these again in the takeaways for you. We then ask them to kind of score them and rank them on which is most important and which is least important. But if you ask the external audience that, so this is the red bar, they will tell you, this is what's important to me. We also ask the question, do you think you will get that if you go and work for the company we're representing? So that's the yellow bar. Then if you ask the internal audience, what will I actually get here? You get the green bar. So what we have here, if you look on the left-hand side, is what people want, the external audiences want, what they think they're going to get, and what they're actually going to get. Now that's fascinating stuff, and clearly where we've got the biggest deltas, where we have the biggest gaps, you can kind of say that's slightly problematic. So here we see an example that external audiences are saying appreciation of the rewards given for the contribution made and expertise shown. So that's all about reward. That's really quite important to our external audience. They don't think, well, they think they're going to get a good degree of it with the client, but actually the reality is they're not going to get as much as they think. Now that's problematic. So we might want to be setting up some kind of project which is saying we need to look at our reward strategy, guys. We're not giving audiences what they need. Equally, if we look over here at number 11, line management that supports and respects and encourages other people. Okay, here again, we see this is important to external audiences. For some reason, they don't think they're going to get very much of that with the organization, but the reality is they're going to get more than they think. So actually, we should be dialing messages up about supportive line management in our EVP and in our employer branding, because we know people want it, but they don't think they're going to get it here. So this starts to give you all kinds of really interesting data to play with, and gives you a real understanding of where you're meeting audience needs, where you're falling short, and where you're exceeding. So it's a really, really little valuable trick to do. So we've done our analysis now. We've been through all of our different research sources. We've started to pull out kind of probably a very long list of things that we're finding cropping up that characterize our organization. Usually I find there'll be somewhere between 15 and 20 points that you can kind of say, yeah, they're coming up over and over again in my groups and in my surveys. They're the things that make us distinct. Then we can start kind of putting this into an EVP framework. So I just want to share this one with you here that we worked on for a client. Now, as you can see, in the middle of these columns, these were the 15 to 20 kind of undeniable truths that we found about the business. Anybody in the business could look at those to greater or lesser extent and go, yeah, I recognize that. That's my organization. But the problem is when you've got 18 to 20 different positive factors, the danger is you go away and start trying to tell 18 to 20 different stories. And actually, people won't remember any of them. It's just too fragmented and too confusing. So what we do here is we start pulling them under headings into categories that are more manageable. So we call these our EVP pillars. And you can see here for this organization, all of our factors dropped quite nicely into these individual buckets. And we were able to kind of create these 4 EVP pillars. So our culture of togetherness is like no others, business of pride and trust, place where I can be my best self, and extraordinary and meaningful work. These now form the basis of our storytelling. We know this stuff is true. We've researched it. We can be confident with it. And we can go out to market now and say, okay, any of these subject matters, we can now get employees telling stories. We can get kind of, do people profiles and ask them to talk about these particular subjects. We know these things are true and real. And that's really, really important to us. So we've got our pillars. We also see, you can see on the top, we then try and blend this into an elevator pitch, as we call it. It's just a little piece of prose that's really useful just to help people get their heads around what's this going to sound like, what's this going to feel like. I always find when you read this back to the exec, it's lovely when they look at it and go, yeah, that's us. It really is. Someone said to me the other day when I shared this, which is one of the loveliest things anyone's ever said to me, said, thank you very much for putting on paper what is in my heart. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to put on paper what's in people's hearts. And most organizations, when you speak to them, you show them this, and they kind of go, yeah, I knew all of that, but I've never seen it put in one place before. I've never seen it put in a structure that I can now go away and use, So it's such a helpful thing to kind of bring together all of these feelings into a consolidated place. What you can see on the bottom here is then what we then do is take this and try and articulate what it makes me feel like. Because what we're trying to do with employer branding is create an emotional reaction, because that's what elevates our employer brand. When people feel something about working for us, it's so much more powerful than if we just go out there and share with them a salary, a benefit, and a description of what the company does. What we want is people locking in and having an emotional reaction and saying, that feels like the type of place I want to be. So you can see here we're saying, I feel like I'm amongst friends and I love the way we work as one. I feel a sense of trust that these are good people who do the right thing. I could be myself, I fit in and I'm fine and I keep developing. And the work is fascinating and important and I love being part of that. You can see for yourself how much more compelling that is than just having those flat functional types of factors presented in front of you. And this is the tool. This is the framework that allows us to then go and start telling those stories. It gives us the guidance. It's the blueprint of everything that we're going to do. It's not something that we publish externally. It's not something that we put on the website. It's our blueprint. When you're building a building, you have a blueprint of what you're going to do. You have your plans laid out, and then you use them to go and build your building. And that's what we're doing here. It's not the building itself. It's the blueprint for the building. Now, as we said at the start, we've now got our pillars, but it's important to make sure that we tailor those messages to our different audiences. And we've done our external research and we've asked external audiences what matters to you, what's really important. And we've built our personas at the start and thought carefully about what our candidates need. So we now know what messages are going to work best in which markets. So we can start to build what we call our message matrix. And here we take our EVP pillars. So this is a different set, this is a different client. But you can see here of their EVP pillars and the kind of supporting statements that go underneath them. We start looking at the different audiences that they're trying to appeal to. So, for example, technicians, what's important to the technician audiences? What have we got in our toolkit that's really going to be important to them? And we see here that, okay, our pillar Better Every Day, which is all about the tools and equipment that they get to use, is the most important thing to them, then followed by it's a people first business, and then the opportunities, and then the direction and purpose of the business. So we know we need to turn up these messages. So when we're going out on social media, telling stories, we need to be talking more about the nature of the work that the tools they're going to be using, the standards of professionalism in the organization. Whereas if we go elsewhere in that business, if we go into their contact center, well, you can see here, the most important thing for these people is that it's people first, driven by values, caring, flexible. We need to be amping up these messages for that audience and tailoring down the stuff about tools, equipment. So it's a really helpful exercise to do. Again, going back over your job families, thinking which of our EVP pillars is going to connect most, which messages do we amp up and down. And when you're going away and starting to produce your content, you can continually come back to this and saying, are we saying the right things for these audiences? Again, a really common problem with employer branding is people try to produce one size fits all content. They see something interesting happening in their organization, they write a story about it, put it out there, and then wonder why nobody's really followed it, nobody's shared it. And the reason is because it wasn't pertinent enough to that particular audience. So segmentation, is really, really important, and tailoring your messages and getting your message matrix right for your different audiences is vital. So there we go. We have built our EVP framework. We have created our message matrix. That's fantastic. Oh, excuse me. I'm just going to go back into this. Timed out on me. Technology, eh? Isn't it wonderful when it works? Okay, sorry about that. Here we go again. So we have our EVP framework built. We've got our message matrix ready, but that's just a piece of paper. What we now need to do is use that and turn it into something that is usable, and that we can start to socialize through our business and start to use creatively. So what do we do next? Well, we start looking at our creative identity development. You might want to work with your internal marketing team to develop your look and feel, or you might want to work with an agency. But the next thing we always do after we've created the EVP framework is to set up a brand and EVP playbook. This becomes the kind of, extends out the blueprint, which is the EVP, and starts going into, the visual feel, and starts giving us something tangible to work with. So I'm just going to share with you an example of one that I've been working with a client recently. So we start off with, I'm just going to skip through this. Just a reminder of the purpose and the values of the organization. But then we take them through the journey of the EVP, a little bit about the employer personality. Again, these are things that we've found out from our research, our internal research. These are things that characterize the organization. But in here, then we share our proposition pillars. Okay, here's our EVP. This is what it means. And then we also share our strap line, the elevator pitch that you've seen in the framework, and our message matrix. So for different parts of their business, again, different messages, different pillars are more important than others. And we did one of these for each of their business areas. We then created some introductory copy for each of their core job families and job functions. So we know which messages are most important to technicians. Now we can craft a little bit of copy to be used at the start of each ad. So it's nice and consistent, but we know we are tapping into those things that are emotionally most important for these people. And we created those for each area. Again, different center, the customer experience center. Again, we know these people, it's more about being friendly, it's more about the culture. So we focus in on those areas here. Then we start to focus in on the visual look and feel. Typography, brand guidelines. Again, you can get all of these from your marketing team. This will already exist. Photography. So again, as part of your employer brand development, you might be doing some bespoke photography, or you might be using some pre-existing photography, but make sure you're putting in there the range of photography that you can use and some guidance if you want to take your own photography. And from here, then we started developing some templates for them that they can use, some assets that you can actually take out to market. So career site, this exhibition stand, stationery, and social media templates. So that now means that we've created a document that means our messaging is consistent. We've shared the EVP. We know that everything in there is accurate and honest and authentic. And we've also shared with them some templates to allow them to go out and start producing stuff and doing their own thing. But the great thing about this is this also allows enough flexibility. So it's giving them, what I usually find with clients is they say, our people will be very willing to share stuff on social media, but they need guidance, they need guidelines, they need some help. They need a template to work to and some guidance on the type of stories that they should be telling. Once you give them that, they'll happily go and do it. So this really does give them everything they need to be able to go away and start telling their own stories. And that's the way you're going to build your employer brand, by your own people telling stories, getting your people to share it across their networks, and really pushing the message out there. So this gives them everything they need. And this is the missing bit for me. As I said, I always find people are willing to share, they just need guidelines. They need templates and guidelines to work to. So we've done it. We've created our EVP. We've segmented our audiences. We've built up personas. We've done internal and external research. We've distilled everything. We've then taken those findings and built our EVP framework, tailored them for different audiences, and we understand now that we're going to go on and create the brand playbook. And that's the starting point of your employer brand. That's how to go from knowing next to nothing to being in a place where you feel informed and ready to go to market with stories that are authentic, that you can trust and are going to hit the mark with those audiences and hit those emotional tones.